When me and my girlfriend finally moved into our dream home, I thought life had finally settled. A quiet street, friendly neighbors, and our rescued cat, Bella, curling up on the windowsill. It felt perfect. The kind of perfect you don't really question, because after years of saving, stressing, and living in cramped apartments, we finally had a place of our own. The house wasn't huge, but it was ours. Fresh paint on the walls, hardwood floors that creaked just enough to remind us it had history, and a backyard where we imagined summer barbecues with friends. Every night we'd sit on the porch with coffee, watching the sun go down. For the first time in a long time, life felt safe. But sometimes safe is just the calm before something you can't explain. And looking back now, I realize that was the last time things felt normal. Because once we moved in, little by little, the house, and what surrounded it, started to show us a darker side we weren't prepared for. At first, the only thing that stood out about the place was the house next door. From the outside, it looked abandoned. The siding was half-painted, with boards leaning against the wall like someone had just stopped in the middle of renovating and never came back. The yard was overgrown, tools rusting in the grass, and a single broken window on the second floor, covered with a piece of plywood that rattled whenever the wind hit it just right. When we asked a couple of neighbors about it, they kind of shrugged it off. One older man across the street said, "That place has been like that for years. Different crews come in, try to fix it up, but they never last long. Always something going wrong." Then he chuckled like it was nothing, but it left me with this unsettled feeling I couldn't quite shake. Bella, our cat, seemed to notice something too. Normally, she was fearless, always exploring, jumping up on counters, curling against our legs. But in that new house, she was different. She refused to go upstairs at night. And more than once, I caught her sitting at the window, ears pinned back, staring at the abandoned house. Sometimes she'd hiss at nothing, the sound sharp and sudden, like she saw something I couldn't. At the time, I brushed it off. Cats are weird, right? I figured she was just adjusting to the new space, but in hindsight, maybe she was trying to warn us. The first couple of nights were quiet, almost too quiet. We weren't used to that kind of silence coming from the city. Out there, once the sun went down, the whole street would sink into this heavy stillness, broken only by the occasional dog barking or the wind brushing against the old trees. At first it felt peaceful, but then little things started to creep in. I remember lying in bed one night when I thought I heard it, this faint, rhythmic sound, like hammering. At first I convinced myself it was just my imagination, but it didn't stop. It was slow, deliberate, and it seemed to come from the abandoned house next door. When I finally worked up the nerve to peek out the window, there was nothing. Just that broken plywood rattling, slightly in the breeze, and so she shot out of bed like something had startled her, tail puffed, staring at the corner of the room. Her eyes were locked on the wall that separated our house from the abandoned one. She made this low, guttural growl I'd never heard from her before. It made my skin crawl. The strangest part came a week later. I stepped outside early one morning to grab the mail, and that's when I noticed it. Muddy boot prints on the sidewalk leading up to our porch. They were fresh, still wet from the night before, but they didn't just stop at the porch. They went right up to our front door, and then stopped. There was no sign of anyone around, no car tracks, no neighbors out early. Just those footprints, sitting there like a reminder that someone had been standing at our door while we slept. It wasn't long after the footprints that we saw him for the first time. It was late, maybe around midnight, when I heard Bella growling again. This time, it wasn't inside the house. She was crouched on the windowsill, fur bristled, staring outside. I followed her gaze, and that's when I saw him. A man. just standing on the edge of our driveway. He wasn't moving, just staring at the house. In one hand, he held something long and metallic. At first I thought it was a pipe, but when the moonlight hit it, I realized it was a crowbar. I froze. There was something about the way he stood there, like he wasn't curious, like he wasn't lost. He looked like he was waiting. I whispered for my girlfriend to come look, and the moment she peeked through the curtain, the man lifted the crowbar and slammed it against our fence with a loud, metallic clang. The sound jolted us both, and Bella bolted under the bed. He didn't say anything at first, just kept hitting the crowbar against the fence over and over, until finally he started shouting. His words were slurred, angry, almost incoherent. Something about getting out, and this isn't yours. We called the police immediately, but by the time the first cruiser pulled up, he was gone. They walked around the property, took a quick statement, and told us it was probably some drunk who wandered off the wrong street. But it didn't end there. The very next night, he came back. Same spot, same crowbar. This time he screamed louder, pacing back and forth in front of our house like he was daring us to come outside. And again, when the cops showed up, he was gone, like he knew exactly when to leave. That's when the fear started to sink in. This wasn't random. This man wasn't just passing by. He was coming here, to us. He was coming here, to us. After the second visit, we knew this wasn't just some drunk wandering the neighborhood. He knew where we lived. He knew when to show up. And the worst part, the police couldn't or wouldn't do anything about it. So we bought cameras, a full set of motion-detecting security cameras for the front and back of the house. I figured, at the very least, we'd have proof of what was happening, and maybe that would make the cops take it seriously. The first night after we installed them, we sat on the couch, scrolling through the live feed on my phone, waiting. Hours went by with nothing but wind, the occasional car, and Bella darting across the living room. But around 2 a.m., the front camera picked up movement. There he was, standing perfectly still at the edge of the driveway again, staring at the house. He didn't move for almost an hour, just stood there. Then, without warning, the feed glitched for a second, just a flicker, and when it cleared, he was gone. No walking away. No fading into the distance. 1 second he was there, the next he wasn't. The following night, it got worse. He showed up again, but this time he paced back and forth in front of the porch, dragging the crowbar along the concrete. The sound of metal scraping filled the audio feed. Bella was hiding under the bed, yowling like she was in pain. When I checked the back camera, my stomach dropped. He was there too. The same man, same crowbar, standing in the backyard at the exact same time. I thought it had to be some kind of glitch, but when we checked the recordings later, the timestamps matched perfectly. It didn't make sense. He couldn't be in two places at once. The final straw came a week later. We woke up one morning, groggy and exhausted, and I went to grab coffee. That's when I noticed the deadbolt on the front door. It was unlocked. We triple-checked that lock every single night, and yet there it was, undone. I swear to you, my blood went cold in that moment, because it didn't just mean he had been outside. It meant at some point during the night, he might have been inside. After that morning, neither of us felt safe anymore. Sleep became impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside felt like him. I started leaving lights on in every room, thinking maybe it would scare him off. My girlfriend, on the other hand, grew quiet and withdrawn, jumping at the smallest noises. We began arguing about whether to move, whether to call the police again, whether we were overreacting. The stress was pulling us apart. Bella was the worst off. She stopped eating regularly and spent most nights wedged under the bed or crouched on the stairs, staring up at the second floor like she knew something was there. Sometimes she'd hiss suddenly at the walls. eyes following something invisible as it moved across the room. Watching her act that way was almost scarier than seeing the man himself. Even the neighbors admitted strange things. One woman told us she'd seen someone in the upstairs window of the abandoned house, though she swore it was impossible. No one lived there, no one had for years. Another neighbor said he heard shouting in the middle of the night, but every time he looked, the street was empty. It was starting to feel less like we were being stalked, and more like we were trapped in some kind of game. And whoever this man was, he knew exactly how to push us to the edge. The breaking point came late one night when the noise started again, this time louder than ever. It wasn't just the crowbar on the fence anymore. It was banging, heavy and violent, rattling the entire front door like he was trying to break it down. We sat frozen in the living room, whispering frantically about what to do. My girlfriend clutched Bella in her arms, and I pulled out my phone to check the live feed. That's when I saw it. The front camera showed nothing. The banging was deafening, shaking the door, but there was no one outside. The feed was completely clear. And then from upstairs we heard Bella's hiss, long and sharp, followed by the sound of footsteps on the second floor. I'll never forget that moment. The sound of those footsteps above us when I knew, without a doubt, we weren't alone. My girlfriend's grip tightened around Bella, and I could hear her whisper, "He's inside." The words sent a chill through me. I wanted to deny it, but deep down I knew she was right. I forced myself to check the upstairs hallway camera, and my stomach dropped. There he was, the man with the crowbar standing in the hallway at the top of the stairs. He wasn't moving, he wasn't speaking, just staring directly into the lens of the camera. His face was pale, blank, almost expressionless, except for his eyes. His eyes were wide, unblinking, locked on us as if he knew we were watching. Then the feed cut out. The banging at the front door stopped instantly, and the whole house fell into silence. My girlfriend started sobbing quietly, begging me not to go upstairs. For a moment, I almost listened, but then I thought of Bella's hiss, the sound of those heavy footsteps, and the unlocked door from before. I had to know. I crept up the stairs, my phone shaking in my hand, every step echoing too loud in the silence. When I reached the top, the hallway was empty. No man, no crowbar, just the faint smell of rust in the air, sharp and metallic. And on the carpet, right outside our bedroom door, was the crowbar. After that morning, neither of us felt safe anymore. Sleep became impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside felt like him. I started leaving lights on in every room, thinking maybe it would scare him off. My girlfriend, on the other hand, grew quiet and withdrawn, jumping at the smallest noises. We began arguing about whether to move, whether to call the police again, whether we were overreacting. The stress was pulling us apart. Bella was the worst off. She stopped eating regularly and spent most nights wedged under the bed or crouched on the stairs, staring up at the second floor like she knew something was there. Sometimes she'd hiss suddenly at the walls, eyes following something invisible as it moved across the room. Watching her act that way was almost scarier than seeing the man himself. Even the neighbors admitted strange things. One woman told us she'd seen someone in the upstairs window of the abandoned house, though she swore it was impossible. No one lived there. No one had for years. Another neighbor said he heard shouting in the middle of the night, but every time he looked, the street was empty. It was starting to feel less like we were being stalked, and more like we were trapped in some kind of game. And whoever this man was, he knew exactly how to push us to the edge. The breaking point came late one night when the noise started again. This time, louder than ever. It wasn't just the crowbar on the fence anymore. It was banging, heavy and violent, rattling the entire front door like he was trying to break it down. We sat frozen in the living room, whispering frantically about what to do. My girlfriend clutched Bella in her arms, and I pulled out my phone to check the live feed. And then, from upstairs, we heard Bella's hiss, long and sharp, followed by the sound of footsteps on the second floor. There he was, the man with the crowbar standing in the hallway at the top of the stairs. He wasn't moving, he wasn't speaking, just staring directly into the lens of the camera. His face was pale, blank, almost expressionless, except for his eyes. His eyes were wide, unblinking, locked on us, as if he knew we were watching. Then the feed cut out. I crept up the stairs, my phone shaking in my hand, every step echoing too loud in the silence. When I reached the top, the hallway was empty. No man, no crowbar. Just the faint smell of rust in the air, sharp and metallic. And on the carpet, right outside our bedroom door, was the crowbar. I didn't even think. I ran back down, grabbed my girlfriend and Bella, and we bolted out of that house into the street, dialing 911 as we went. When the police arrived, they swept the entire place. No signs of forced entry, no footprints inside, no broken windows. Just the crowbar lying there on the floor like someone had carefully placed it down for us to find. The officers tried to brush it off, saying maybe someone had broken in and slipped out before they arrived. But that explanation didn't make sense. Not when all the doors and windows were still locked from the inside. We stayed at a hotel that night, and the next, and the night after that. Every time we thought about going back, the image of that man's face staring into the camera replayed in my mind. My girlfriend couldn't stop shaking whenever she mentioned the crowbar. Bella refused to leave the hotel bed. A week later, we broke the lease, packed up what we could carry, left the rest behind. It wasn't worth it. Not the money, not the house, not the so-called dream we thought we'd bought. Before we left for good, I looked at the house one last time. And as I turned toward the abandoned property next door, I swear I saw movement in the upstairs window. Just the faintest shadow shifting behind that broken plywood. I don't know who he was. I don't know how he got in. And the truth is, I don't think I want to know. All I know is, sometimes, the scariest thing isn't the monster under your bed, or the haunted house down the street. Sometimes, it's the man with the crowbar, waiting just outside, staring, knowing exactly when to come back. When I was 19, I drove for hours every weekend to visit my girlfriend who lived 2 states away. I didn't mind the long drives, back roads, gas station coffee, late-night playlists. It was kind of peaceful, at least it used to be. One night in early fall, I left her place later than usual. By the time I hit the highway, it was already past midnight. The road was empty, lined with trees on both sides, no lights except my own headlights cutting through the dark. That's when I saw him. A man was standing on the shoulder of the road, thumb out like he was hitchhiking. At first, I thought maybe he'd broken down, but there was no car in sight. Just him, tall, thin, wearing this faded jacket, his face hidden beneath the hood. I told myself to just keep driving. Everyone knows you don't pick up strangers at night. But as I passed, I swear I felt his eyes follow me. And when I glanced at the rearview mirror, my stomach flipped, because he wasn't standing there anymore. I kept driving, heart pounding, telling myself maybe I imagined it. But 10 minutes later, my headlights swept across the side of the road, and there he was again. Same man, same jacket, thumb out. Only this time, he was smiling. I slammed my foot on the gas and sped past, refusing to look in the mirror. But I could feel it. The weight of his grin burned into me, like he wanted me to know he wasn't going away. By now, the empty road didn't feel empty anymore. Every mile, I expected to see him. And sure enough, I did. 2 more times. Always ahead of me. Always waiting. Finally, when I turned onto the last stretch toward home, relief washed over me. I pulled into my driveway, killed the engine, and sat there, trying to convince myself it was all in my head. Just exhaustion. Just tricks of the dark. But when I opened the door, something moved in the corner of my eye. Across the street, under the dim glow of the street lamp, stood the same man. Hood up, hands at his sides, no longer smiling, just staring at my house. I bolted inside, locked every door and window, and barely slept that night. By morning, he was gone, but for weeks I refused to drive at night, and every now and then I catch myself glancing at the side of the road on long drives, half expecting to see him again, waiting with that grin. When I was a kid, maybe 8 or 9, I was terrified of the dark. Like a lot of kids, I guess. But my fear wasn't just some vague monsters under the bed kind of thing. Mine was specific. I was afraid of the closet in my bedroom. It wasn't a big closet, just a sliding door, one of those cheap wooden ones that never shut all the way. But at night, when the lights were off, it always looked a little too open, just wide enough for something to be watching. I used to beg my parents to let me sleep with the door shut. But no matter how tightly I slid it, by morning it would always be cracked open again. They told me it was just the frame settling, or the air from the vent. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Because sometimes, when I lay in bed staring at it, I could hear breathing, slow, deep, coming from inside. One night, I woke up to the sound of Bella, our family cat at the time, hissing at the closet. She was crouched at the end of my bed, fur standing straight up. Her eyes fixed on that tiny gap in the door. I sat up, heart hammering, and whispered her name, but she didn't even look at me. She just growled, her gaze locked, and then the door slid open. Not fast, not dramatic, just this slow, deliberate inch, until the gap was wide enough that I could see something. It wasn't a face, not really, just 2 pale shapes, low to the ground, glinting faintly in the dark, eyes watching me. I screamed, and my parents came running, but when they turned on the lights, the closet was empty. For years, I told myself it was a dream, that I imagined it. But last year, when I was back home visiting, my mom brought up something that made my blood run cold. She laughed about how when I was little, I always swore something lived in that closet, and then she said, almost casually, "Funny thing is, even after you moved out, sometimes I'd find that closet door cracked open in the morning. I'd shut it at night, make sure it was tight, but it never stayed shut." She said it like it was nothing, but I saw the way she avoided my eyes when she said it.